We're going to remove the pattern from the front and back sections and we're going to sew them together. We're going to sew these because it's silk chiffon and a very fine fabric. We're going to sew using a French seam, which means that we're going to start by laying them wrong sides together, so the right side of the fabric is facing out. And we're going to sew the first seam very close to the edges here, down either side, stopping at the large circle on the pattern, at the base of the armhole. We've sewn this very close to the edge. We're going to cut the thread and we're going to trim the edge to make it even. I'm going to do it with a pair of pinking shears, which stops the fabric from fraying. I'm going to trim this all the way along. Going to turn the fabric, and on the wrong side we're going to press the seam flat and then we're going to fold it so the right sides are together, and we're going to then sew down this other seam. But first I'm going to press it. To do the second seam, there's the first seam on the inside, pressed flat and folded, and I've done this on both side seams, so we're ready to sew. And this seam, while the other one was as close to the edge as possible, this one should be about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. With the side seam sewn, we're going to place the pattern back on the front side of the fabric. Now the front and the back are at the moment both the same, so you decide which is the front and which is the back. And we're going to mark, there's 2 circles at the edge here, we're going to mark the second circle with a pin, and then we're going to just cut down to that circle. With the slit in the front cut, we're now going to finish it. We're going to hand roll it, just fold it over twice by hand, and then we're just going to do a little binding stitch on it to hold it firmly in place and give it a nice couture finish. So with the neck edge neatly bound by hand, we're going to put the top aside and we're going to move onto the sleeves for a moment. For the sleeves, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sew the underside of the sleeve together. That's this side of the sleeve. We're going to sew it down this seam, and we're also going to use the French seam. So we're going to start with the wrong side of the fabric together and we're going to sew on the outside, the right side. I've sewn my edge. I'm going to trim it, and then as before we're going to open it, and on the wrong side we're going to press it flat, and then we're going to fold and press along the edge here with the iron. Here we are finishing our French seams on the inside edge of the sleeves. Now comes the exciting part. we're going to edge the sleeves. I pre-made these bindings. I suggest you watch our tutorial on how to iron your bindings. It's going to make your life a lot easier when we put these bindings on the edge. So to bind the edge of the sleeves, we've got our bias binding that's folded into 4. We partially open it up and we line up the edge of the bias with the edge of the sleeve and pin it into place. Then we are very carefully going to sew down the fold line. So we've got, if we open it up, we've got 3 fold lines. We're going to sew down the fold line that's closest to the edge that we've just pinned. We finish sewing this. Now, we fold the bias over and over again. And because we made our bias so neatly before, we know that these 2 edges are exactly the same. So we can do what's called stitch in the ditch. So we sew as close as possible to the very edge of the bias tape, and we hold both pieces on the front and the back, and there we have our sleeve edging. So we have done the stitch along the seam here to hold the edging in place, and I've gone ahead and I've pinned already at the points where we are going to sew down the edge of the sleeve. We're going to hand sew this. I've got the pins here, and I'm just going to start on the inside, catch a stitch, just a tiny weeny amount, take out the pin, and we're going to keep the thread on the inside here to hold it together, and we're going to do this at all 4 points, 2 points on each sleeve. The seams are joined at these 2 points on the sleeves, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to gather the bottom of the sleeve because we're going to put the cuff tie on there. So what I'm going to do to gather is I'm going to put in shirring thread in my bobbin. We only put shirring thread in the bottom because you always do it on the underneath. Bring it up, and then I'm going to just do a stitch on my widest possible stitch around the bottom here so that I can gather it up. With the shirring stitch on the underneath, we're going to gently pull the shirring stitch to gather the sleeve. And it's nice. Make sure the gathers are evenly spread around. And when they are, we're going to take another of our pre-made bias tapes. This is using the cuff. Again, use our tutorial on how to make your bias binding. It's in 4. And we're going to attach it. I pre-attached this one with right sides together. Put your bias tape around the edge of the gather and pin it into place, and then we're ready to just sew that. We've stitched the cuff onto here. I'm now going to remove the shirring thread, and you can see how easy that was to remove, which is why we use the shirring thread, not ordinary thread. I'm just going to trim this a little bit because it's slightly too long. And then I'm going to fold over the rest of it and sew it into place all the way from the very ends. At the moment I've left the ends open here because I am just going to fold those in and then hand stitch them closed. Again, it's that couture finish that looks so nice. Remember with the sleeves that we left the underarm open above the big circle? Well, now it's time to attach it to the bodice. I've done it already on this side. Now, again, we're doing a French seam, so it's definitely a much more tricky way to do it, but pinning the wrong sides together, so the seam's going to be on the outside. I'm going to match the underarm point, which is the large circles, together, and I'm going to pin. And I'm going to pin it all the way up to the top here. So you can see that with your cuffed edges of the sleeve on the outside, it's going to be very wide at the top here, and we're going to have the sleeve straight down, slightly out. It's going to be a straight line along the top when we finish pinning. So we're going to pin around here, do the seam, and then we're going to turn it back through the other way and finish the French seam to attach the sleeves to the bodice part. The blouse is starting to take shape. Here are the sleeves over here. Now what we want to do is we're going to attach the neck facing. So the first thing is we have to just sew the two pieces together. Quick and easy. Let's trim that seam. We're going to mark the center back point. And that will be where we start attaching the seam. So with the right sides together now, we're not doing a French seam on this, right sides together, pin the seam of the neck facing to the center point of the back, and then work your way around on both sides. When you come to the top of the sleeve, you're going to pin first one side of the top of the sleeve, then lift up the other side, and with a very tiny overlap, pin the other side in place. And work your way around to the front. Of the blouse. And then we're ready to sew along the seam allowance, just to attach it. With the neck facing attached to the first seam, I'm going to take this to the iron and I'm going to press along this seam. So we're going to press it flat open. Then I'm going to fold it under and press to have a very nice, neat seam here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to press along here my 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just going to iron that flat, so it's going to be really easy to pin it and sew it. So let's go to the iron. I finished ironing, and if you can see that with all the seams pre-pressed here, my seam allowance pre-pressed, it's going to make it so easy to pin it flat into place. going to pin all the way around here. Be careful when you come to the sleeve attachments that you want to make sure that these are together. We put a slight overlap in the sleeve, and you want to carry that down to the edge of the facing. So it's tricky to hold it in place. So I'm going to pin it from this side as well. So pin all the way around here, and then we're going to be ready to sew. We're going to sew one seam along the very bottom of this, very close to the edge so it looks neat, and then we're going to sew another line right in the middle of here, which will give us our tunnel for threading through the tie. So we finished the neck facing here with the extra seam in the middle, which creates a tunnel. And we've gone ahead and finished off the hem as well. Now I've used a rolled hem on the serger. If you don't have a serger, what we recommend is just really hand rolling it, pinning, and do a very tiny stitch on the sewing machine close to the edge here, or just sewing it by hand. But we're using chiffon, so we want a very light hem so it keeps a floaty look to it. And the last thing that we're going to do is the tie around the neck that's going to pull everything together. Now the pattern says that you should make it out of fabric, but what we're going to do is we're going to make it out of cord as well. So you can always be creative and do alternatives with your dress patterns. You don't have to follow the rules. So I'm going to use a safety pin, put it in the end here, and thread it around. I'm going to thread it around the top slot of the neck facing. You have a choice. If you want a little frill left around your neck, then do it in the lower tunnel, but you have two tunnels here, so you can choose whether you have a frill or whether you just have a gather at the top.